Good afternoon, Notre Dame fans, and welcome to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. I am Vince D'Addario. I'm the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. That guy right there, that's Brian Driscoll. He's the publisher at irishbreakdown.com. And we got a fun show for you guys today. We're going to talk about a couple of different items. We're gonna talk about the new fun.
No. We got two fun shows planned.
Oh yeah,
today.
that's a very good point. This is show number 1. Right, because there will be a show later at 7:30, 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock sharp.
We'll go live at 7 o'clock. We expect some sort of announcement to happen around 7:30.
Yes, so the decision of wide receiver Braylon James out of Texas, and they will break down that whole decision and what it means for Notre Dame, depending on which way he goes. And there will be a Q&A following that as well. So that'll be a fun one tonight. But today, we are going to talk about the new fund initiative at Notre Dame, headed by Brady Quinn, former Notre Dame quarterback, obviously. And then we're going to talk about the spring game, and we're going to talk about what we're looking for from an offensive side of things, I believe, today.
And then we'll do defense later in the week.
Exactly. Yeah. So what we're looking for offensively from the spring game, what can we get out of it? Again, it is a glorified practice. So it's not like things are going to be set in stone following the spring game, but what are we looking for when we see them play on Saturday? And by the way, for those of you who are not in this area, Saturday is supposed to be the friggin' nicest day. I don't even get it. Like, it's 30 degrees today. It's going to be 81 degrees on Saturday, and then it's going to be back down into the lower 50s like the next day. Like, I don't even understand it.
Don't care as long as it's nice.
It's going to be beautiful on Saturday. So if you're coming into town for the Blue Gold game, you are going to be treated to some pretty stinking nice weather. So let's kick this thing off, and with the Fund initiative at Notre Dame,
which stands for the Friends of the University of Notre Dame.
Right.
So FUND.
Yes.
Because when I first saw it, I was like, well, that's unoriginal. Because I just saw the name. It Fund. Like Fund. And I'm like, well, that's kind of lame. Then you see what it means. Like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Okay, cool.
Sometimes the easiest things are the most obvious. Yeah. And this one was. So it was pretty good. And so we're going to kick this thing off with JoJo. Jojo Pineda gave us a nice little super chat there. So we appreciate that, Jojo. It comes along with a question. He says, good afternoon, guys, and IB Nation. I'm curious to know more about the Fund by Quinn and Mendoza and how this might change things to trying to stay with NIL. So that's a great way to kick off this conversation,
sure.
Brian. I think this is a great idea. I think that it has
to be done right.
It absolutely
has to be done right.
And I think it's starting out in the right vein.
Well, I mean, we'll see, but I think so. And basically, the reading the article yesterday, this was started in January.
Yes.
They started doing this, and this is kind of how it's always going to be for Notre Dame, right? In that Notre Dame is always, people associated with Notre Dame, there's always going to be like hey, we got to do this right. And the first thing I want to make clear this is going to be the question that a lot of people have, especially the recruiting junkies. How's this going to help with recruiting? Well, it's not going to help directly with recruiting at all. This is not a thing where Notre Dame is not going to engage, or anyone partnered with Notre Dame. This isn't a partnership with Notre Dame. Right. It has to be an independent thing. But anyone associated in any way with Notre Dame understands they are not going to break the rules and create enticements for players to come to Notre Dame.
It's not a blank check. Happen. It's not a blank check situation for recruits.
Well, correct. It's not any kind of check situation for recruits. And, so it's not going to be, it's going to be used for current players. Now, does that mean it's not going to have an impact on recruiting? It absolutely will, because at the end of the day, none of these players are getting paid till they show up on campus, and now that's a problem that I have in NIL. We'll have that conversation we'll have that for another day. We're going to have a Fixing College Football series this offseason, where we're going to talk about the transfer portal, the playoff, NIL, all this stuff. And we're going to have different shows on it. So we'll talk about it more then. But Notre Dame isn't going to and shouldn't get involved in basically paying players to come to your college.
Right.
They were very clear about that. So that's the first thing to understand. The second thing that I was concerned about is I didn't want to get into a situation, if I'm Notre Dame, to where you lose your soul in the process. But at the same time, you also have to be aware that you do need to be able to provide legitimate compensation for players if you're going to recruit top players. I mean, that's just the reality of it. You can't, like we've talked about, kids that come to Notre Dame, it's not going to be who's the highest bidder, and then they're going to pick Notre Dame. That's never going to be the case for Notre Dame, right? They're never going to be the highest bidder in those scenarios, and that's fine, because They've gotten plenty of kids over the years that they didn't offer a cent to that were getting 6-figure offers from other schools. That is 100% fact. Okay,
yes.
kids have turned down money like that to come to Notre Dame. That's a fact. And so what Notre Dame has got to do to say, hey, look, we still have to represent something different. And that's what as I've read more about this, I've talked to some friends of mine, and I'll have more to say about some of that. This is a situation, Vince, where this isn't just getting a paycheck. They also were very clear in the article, the Athletic article, that this also isn't just showing up at a charity and spending a couple minutes there and then getting a check and bouncing. That this is going to involve you're doing work with the community. You're going to make an impact in your community, and then you will get rewarded for that, which I think is an important. And the other part of it is it does sound like it's going to be a situation where it's not going to be like this, this collective thing that happened recently where every kid got $3,000. It's not going to be like that. There's going to be kids that are going to be making a lot more money than some other players. That's just the reality of it. That was always going to happen. There was no way you're going to be able to pay your fourth string quarterback the same amount your first string quarterback if you're going to do it in a way that matters. It's just not going to happen. So there will be opportunities for that. So when I think about a guy like Blake Fisher, who in Logan Diggs, for example, two kids that constantly post their social media, their engagement with different local communities. Well, these kids are doing it for free because they want to have an impact in their community. Now they're going to get compensated for it, which I think is awesome. And so you've got to do something, which is the spirit of what NIL was supposed to be about.
Correct.
You're benefiting off your name, image, and likeness while, performing things like advertisements and engagements and things like that. And so I do like the spirit of it. It is a situation where now you can make money, good money from the people I've talked to, real good money. But you're also making a difference in your community. And that's what Notre Dame is supposed to be about. And Vince, people in this channel got to know that's big for us.
Yep.
Because some of the organizations that were named in that article are organizations that we've partnered with.
Exactly.
They talked about the St. Joseph Boys and Girls Club. Irish Breakdown gave $5,000 to the St. Joseph Boys and Girls Club to help out. Like, that's a great organization. And the fact that that's one that they're kind of pointing to, hey, let's partner with them or the food bank or whatever else, those are great things. And so they're going to get money because here's the reality. The St. Joseph Boys and Girls Club does not have the money. That's the reason we gave them money.
Right.
They don't have the money to say, hey, starting quarterback at Notre Dame, come be on our commercial or come do this, come do that. They don't have the money for that. The local food bank doesn't have money for advertising like that. They don't have these kind of things. Now, these outside organizations step in and say, we're going to help you, local community organization, and we're going to help you, Notre Dame player. And I think that's awesome. Yep. And that speaks to what makes Notre Dame different. And so I love the idea behind it. I think it's a great idea. It's something that I think is a bit of a game changer for Notre Dame if it works the way that I think it's going to work. And I think that it's something that is good for the players. Because I think it's important that as you're getting this big paycheck, you're doing it while working with people that are disadvantaged or are in a tough spot or are dealing with a loss or whatever the case may be. And I think it's a good reminder for this isn't something you should look at yourself and say, I'm entitled to this. No, you're blessed to be in that situation. And I think that is so good for these young people to kind of get that lesson to where you don't just take it like, gimme, 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 gimme. It's you're also getting, but you're giving back, man. And I think that's the way to go for me. That's absolutely the way to go for me.
Well, it's what I would call a win-win-win situation. It's a win for the local organization because they're getting help and they're getting everything that they need out of the situation.
Because you don't understand how much just something like $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 can do for these organizations.
Because those organizations are not only going to get the volunteer hours and the commitment from the players, but they're also going to get money out of the situation, which I think is something that people aren't really understanding and, with this whole thing. And I think that's important. I think the player not only I think volunteering is hugely important. It's something that I ask my high school players to do. And I think that you can get a lot out of just volunteering, so that it's a win for them there, but it's also a win because they're going to get some money out of the deal too. Right. I mean, I'm okay with that. That's an okay thing. So it's a win from that standpoint. It's a win from the volunteering standpoint, and it's a win from the organization standpoint, because not only are they going to get the volunteer hours and the recognition from the player, but they're also getting some money on the side. Not on the side, that makes it sound, but you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They're getting money as well. And I think all of those things, I don't see a negative as long as that is the focus of this and it stays on that trail, right? It stays on that path. I think this is great. I think it's a great idea.
Here's the other part about it too, Vince, is obviously it's missional in focus, which we're all about. It's dealing with helping the community, which is something the Notre Dame football program has been about for a while, which I really like. Hunter Biven and other people drive that ship, which I really appreciate. But from a conversation I had today with somebody that gave me a heads up here a few minutes ago, this isn't the last thing that's going to happen. Right. I mean, this isn't the last thing there's other things in the works with other Notre Dame players that'll be different, but with the similar ends. So this isn't like, this is it for Notre Dame. That's the way it's going to go.
We do have another super chat, Brian, that I do want to put up. And I have a comment. I'm sure you will as well. I'm not sure if you had a chance to read it yet or not.
I did. Yeah. And I really, so read the thing.
So Charlie Weiss's last belt loop. Thank you for the super chat. We do appreciate that. He says the fund is a great idea. The issue is I don't think this will move the needle at all with recruiting. Will be the same type of kids going to Notre Dame, not going to be the dudes that win national championships. My problem with this is why do people assume that people with their hands out are the only ones that can win a national championship?
Well, it's also this false notion that I think exists that all these top players are just going to go to whoever gives them the most money. There's zero evidence of that. None.
Right. Exactly.
And it's never been true. Look, Keon Keeley committed to Notre Dame in an era where NIL was a thing, right? And this idea that, Notre Dame had a roster of kids filled with kids that could win championships in 2015. And I know for a fact that a lot of those kids were offered certain amounts of money.
They turned down money
to school at Notre Dame. You have to understand is there's this notion that, well, kids just care about money. There's no evidence of that. That's projection.
Right.
That's assuming this. You and I have been dealing with young people for a long time. There are kids like that.
Absolutely.
There are some kids who would rather not jump at the money, but want to have a chance to go and say, hey, I would like to go to Notre Dame or this other school, but my mom's just lost her job and they're in tough situations. That's why they take the money. But the reality is that any kid that's smart enough to get into Notre Dame, and I don't mean that academically, I mean that with a brain. A lot of these top kids, especially any that have advisors, and I know a lot of these parents and a lot of these kids, they're going to look at it and say, hey, you can get an automatic this here to go to this school, or you can pretty much get the same amount of money to go to Notre Dame. It's just you're going to have to do some work for it in the community, this, that, and the other thing. And you're going to get a Notre Dame degree. Look, do y'all understand Louis Nix's mom was not in a good neighborhood? I've heard stories about, broken windows and needing, struggling to pay bills. And Louis was going to come out after 2012. And his mom said, no, you promised me you would get your degree. There's a lot of moms like that in this country.
Yep.
And a lot of people don't want to accept that and don't want to think about that. They just think all these parents, are there some parents that are just so, yes.
Oh, absolutely. No question. No question.
But there's also a lot that aren't.
Right.
So Vince, I would like for you, I need to jump out real quick. I got to do an interview here with somebody. I need you to just kind of handle just kind of talking about this a little bit and then just answer some questions and things like that. And then I'll be right back.
Okie dokie. So I think it's important for people to understand. I want to pull up this other comment that I found, going through the chat. And we'll kind of do a back and forth here chat-wise while Brian's out. But David Solomon says, it all sounds good. These student athletes are already under a heavy load between classes and football, and now they have to work in the community to earn this money. When are they going to find time? They're going to have plenty of time to do the work in the community. Yes. Do they have all of those things that you named? No question about it. Do they have? But you also have to understand some of the guys have an amazing workload when it comes to school. Some of the guys spread it out over summer, fall, spring. There's plenty of time to work in the community. There's plenty of opportunity for these guys to do it. I mean, look at the guys who are doing the in the garage podcast, right? They seem to find time to do that work, right? There's guys that volunteer in the community already. It's just not all over social media. They have the opportunity to do it. So if it's important to them, if they want to do it, it's just like anything else in anybody else's life. If something's important to you, you make time for it, right? I have many, many jobs, but I still make time for my kids, right? If it's important to you, you make time for it. So that's where I would push back on that, David. I understand what you're saying. These guys do have, obviously a lot going on in their lives, but if it's important to them, they will make time. And I do feel that way. And I don't think it's going to be an issue for the guys that really want to be involved and the guys that really want to do what they're doing. And so I think that they'll be okay. Rob wants to know where the IB tailgate is going to be this Saturday. I will be on campus. Rob, I'll tell you what, I don't believe that there is a plan for a blue gold tailgate. I will say that I'm not even going to be at the game because I have a game to coach that day. I have an 11 a.m. game, and so I'll be taking advantage of the 81-degree weather finally and coaching a game that day. So I'm not going to be able to make it to the blue gold game. And so I don't believe that there's going to be a tailgate. It's going to be a pretty subdued situation, blue gold game wise. So no tailgate this week, but I'm sure that we're going to have multiple as the season progresses. All right. So basically, you guys can just throw some questions here into the chat. I'm going to kind of go through and see if there's some stuff that we can chat about while we wait for Brian to come back. I know that he was waiting on this particular interview. I know that he was waiting on it, and it is a time-sensitive interview. So I'm sure that is the case for him, and that is why he had to get off kind of abruptly. And this particular interview was basically like, hey, we got to do it now or we can't do it at all. So I'm sure that is what is going on at the moment. Just a reminder for those who have just jumped in to the chat, we will have a second show this evening at 7 o'clock. The Braylon James is going to make his decision on what school he is going to attend tonight at 7. And so, excuse me, Irish Breakdown will have show number 2 this afternoon, and he will be making his decision, and we will talk about what that means to Notre Dame, either positively or negatively, depending on how his decision goes, but should be a good show. And then there will also be a Q&A after that as well for those of you who throw in some questions tonight. I know Ryan is not going to join us this afternoon for the normal Q&A. I think he's saving all the good stuff for this evening, so make sure that you come back tonight at 7 o'clock. Rob O'Meara says, do you expect Buckner and Pine to play the full blue gold game or just a half or so? Well, it's going to be interesting. I think they'll play more than a half. I think the thing is that usually because of TV purposes, they try to squeeze the game into like a 2-hour kind of a window. And since it is, they're going to be wearing the red jerseys and all of that stuff, they're not going to have to deal with contact unless they decide to take the red jersey off of Tyler Buckner. I would be surprised if that was the case. But since, it kind of reminds me of a couple of years ago when Phil Jakovic was in the spring game and they had a red jersey on him. And it absolutely affected the way he was playing the game because his legs kind of set up his throws and without his legs, he's not really able to do a whole lot. And they were calling sacks from like a mile away, if I remember correctly. And so it would be nice to see Tyler Buckner without a red jersey on, but I would be surprised if they did that just because of how important he is to the team. But I think they'll play more than a half. I mean, you look at they got 4 quarterbacks. I believe they're going to be playing in the game. So that means 2 on a team. And so you've got Ronnie Paulus the third. I believe he's the third. So he'll be a backup for one of the teams. And then Steve Angeli will be a backup for the other team. They'll get time. Don't get me wrong. They'll get time. But as far as I'm aware, there's still a quarterback competition going on. And so they're going to want to give those two, as much playing time as they possibly can. So I would see them playing more than a half. At least that's what I would do if I was the coach. Now, they have not given us any indication as to what that's going to be. The draft is tomorrow morning for the blue gold game, which I think is going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to be there. I believe they're going to allow us to live, tweet and message boards and all that stuff while it's going on. And if that is the case, I'll be on the message board and I'll be giving everybody a blow by blow for who's getting drafted and what that's going to look like and how that is going to be. So, I guess since I am talking about the draft, might as well just go into it and kind of how things are going to go. Jerome Bettis is going to be the commissioner of the draft, and they're going to start it off with a coin flip, and so one team obviously will go first, and they're going to have an option to pick the position group that they're going to start with. So that's how they're going to do it. They're going to go position group by position group and draft that way, right? So let's say they pick the quarterbacks first. So whoever gets first pick gets to pick the position group, and then they go all the way down through that position group back and forth. And then they pick the next position group, and they go all the way through that back and forth. So I think it's going to be kind of a fun day. It's going to be fun to kind of keep an eye on who goes where and things of that nature. It's going to be I like that kind of stuff, so that's why I am going to be there tomorrow, and I will try to keep everybody up to date with how that is going. John has a really interesting question here. He says, Vince, as a parent, how would you approach an NIL recruitment? So, that's very interesting. I do have a son who hopefully will be playing at the next level someday. There will probably not be NIL, situation with him. He's a really good soccer player and he's a kicker for the football team. So, there's a chance that he could play at the next level, which is great. But if he was a top level recruit and it was an NIL situation, the biggest, and of course, I'm saying all this before somebody tries to hand me a blank check, for the services of my son. I would like to think that would not sway me in where my son would go to school. He's an excellent an academic situation, so I want it to be the right fit academically for my kid, and I think that I've raised him to think the same. To be honest with you, and I think that it's a slippery slope with NIL. I really do think that, and if I'm the parent of a top quarterback, for example, or top defensive end, and all of those opportunities are there. I'm trying to take my thoughts out of being a Notre Dame fan, right? And what Notre Dame could bring to the table for my son, and for his family moving forward, right? His extended family as he gets older and all of those things. I think the degree is the most important. So you want to go someplace where you can be competitive in the classroom, competitive on the football field, right? And then competitive in your future. Notre Dame has all of those things. And I would want him to look at a school like that. We're probably going to be looking at smaller schools. And so the academic piece is going to be really, really important, right? What can prop him up? And I think a place like Notre Dame and a thing like the fund, right? The Friends of the University of Notre Dame, I think is actually really, really important, because I've always taught him and I've taught my other kids that you have to earn everything that you get, right? And they see that with me all the time, right? I have multiple jobs and I earn what I get. And I would want him to earn whatever NIL type money that he gets, right? And so I think it's fantastic having him have to earn that money while community service and all of those things. I think that's a great way to do it. I have no problem with kids getting paid to for their time and things of that nature. I have no problem with that whatsoever, but I would also caution him about people and their intentions and things like that. So it would be all about the relationships with the coaches. Are they genuine? Are they real? Are they true? Do they know about my kid? Do they know about his family? Things like that. Is the fit right? That's the most important thing for me, is the fit and the academic piece. And then third would be the athletic piece. Can you go out and win championships? I think it's not important, right? I don't want my kid to go to a team that's over just so that he can get a good education. I want him to have all of that, right? And so I think that's all important, all of it. It's very, very important to make sure that you check all the boxes. The Ryan Express says, will the Blue Gold game play like normal with standard scoring? That has not been delineated yet, to be honest with you. Usually we get an idea of what the scoring is going to. There are a few years where they put they get an extra sheet in the press box that shows you the scoring. and we don't know what it is until we see it. And I don't know what the plan is going to be for today. Maybe they will announce that tomorrow, and what that's going to look like at the draft. And if that's the case, I will make sure that I get that out to you guys. But they have not announced that to the media as to what the scoring is going to be like. And so we will let you know as soon as we know. But as far as I know, we do not know the answer to that. But that's a really good question, Ryan. I think the convoluted Stableford scoring that they've done in the past, where you never know what points are what, I think that's just confusing as all get out. I don't have a problem. Like, obviously, touchdowns, you can score points. I think maybe you should get points for like a 3 and out. I have no problem with that if you were doing an offense versus a defense situation. But if you're having a draft, I think it should be a game. You play the game. I mean, you've got equal number of starters on offense, equal number of starters on defense, and you've mixed in first and second team. Play it like a game. I have no problem with them playing it like a game. The Stableford scoring, I think, only really works if you've got the first team offense versus the first team defense, and then second offense versus second defense, etc. So I'm hoping that since they're doing it like a draft, that they're going to score it like an actual game. So that's going to be a lot of fun to watch for sure. Bobby, he says, Vinny, can you adopt me so I can live somewhere close enough to finally see a Notre Dame game live? Bobby, I'll tell you what, man. It's me, my wife, and 5 kids. I don't think anybody wants to join that room. Nobody wants to join that house. I can promise you that. So nobody wants to be adopted into my family. You'd be sleeping on a cot under somebody else's bed. It's like a barracks in my house. So welcome back, Brian. We are kind of just going through some of the questions here. Some people are asking some questions about the scoring for the blue gold game.
Yeah.
But we haven't heard any of that.
I apologize for jumping out, Vince. That was actually Brady Quinn.
I figured.
I was finally able to connect with him and just talk with him about this further. So I'll have an article about it here later on. But I just wanted to kind of ask him some very important questions, and it was good. It was good. We had a chance to talk about sort of the spirit of what this is all about. It was interesting too. He mentioned there was something I wanted to ask him about. Is not just any player's not eligible for this. And what I mean by that is if you're not going to class, if you're getting in trouble, if you've got some really bad, inappropriate, social media posts, things like that, you may not be eligible for this. And I think that alone is going to be a benefit to these players. Absolutely. Because it's one of those things where it's like, hey, look, you got to understand this is a situation where you're social media now, and I'm thank God there wasn't social media when I was 17, 18 years
Seriously, old. You're not wrong.
Because I'd have had like my rap lyrics on there all the freaking time. I'd have got so canceled in a heartbeat. And I would have been hammering people like, oh, thank God there wasn't a Twitter back then. But it's about, hey, let's prepare these young men to understand anything you do that's in the public sphere is your brand. That's you creating your brand, good or bad.
Right.
And you need to think about that. And I thought that was really good too, because there's now incentives. Hey, you want to be a part of this, do things the right way. Right. And some of the other things that I've heard are in the works at Notre Dame are going to be very similar. This is meant to help build you up. You know what I mean? This isn't just handing out cash. And I love the fact that Notre Dame is looking at this from or the players from Notre Dame are looking at this. And this is something that Brady Quinn made very clear. He's like, look, part of this is we're trying to stay within the framework of what NIL is about. So that way, when the NCAA or the Congress or whoever makes these rules, it won't affect them because even though it may, right? But trying to stay within the spirit of what the rules are supposed to be about, as opposed to just some of these other things that people are doing that eventually are just going to not be allowed to be done. And so it's very adamant as well about this is not for recruits. This is for Notre Dame players. He also mentioned that there's also already a couple women's basketball players that they're going to be bringing on board here very soon. So the goal is to eventually get this thing big enough to where it's going to impact all the sports.
That's great.
Huge.
That's great.
And the other thing he mentioned too, which I think he goes like, Notre Dame has the 8th highest endowment in the country, right? Yet it's one of the smallest schools in Division I. It's like one of the 5 to 7 smallest schools. So that's the thing is like, let's say Ohio State and Notre Dame have the same endowment, right? Well, that one's from like 50,000 students and one's for 8,000 students.
Yeah.
Right? You get the point?
Yep.
Right. And so if you kind of look at it that way, so meaning like there's a lot of donors, and this is the impression I got from several people that I know. There's a lot of people with a lot of money that want to impact NIL, but they also understand because they're Notre Dame grads, a lot of them, but we're going to do this the right way.
Exactly. They don't just want to write a blank check to people.
Right.
That's not how they want to do it.
Right. Yeah. Which is what like a lot of these guys at Miami and some of these other schools are doing. They're just saying, hey, here's $10 million. Go have fun.
Right.
They're like, no. We're trying to impact these young people's lives, not just hand them cash.
Exactly.
And that was a big thing from that interview. It's a big thing of some of these other things that I'm hearing are being worked on. These are meant to be not just money raisers for you. And not every player is going to get money. That's the difference between this and like a collective where every kid gets like $3,000. And it is, and they say, look, we're not going to say, this kid's going to make this and that kid's going to make that. But what he did say is we also don't want to put a cap on it, right? It's about the value that you bring.
Exactly.
And the opportunities that are there. So he talked about how this isn't an agent thing. The agents aren't going to get a cut of what they're doing. They're not doing anything to do. This is us and the player. That doesn't mean an agent can't advise you and this type of thing. So I really like it. And the cool thing too is, Vince, is a lot of these kids are already super engaged in the community.
Yeah.
I mean, and so this is going to be a thing. Hey, you're already
doing it. Yeah.
All these kids now have all these media obligations. I'm doing an advertisement for a local car dealership. I'm doing an advertisement for this, channel over here, this thing over here. And now all of a sudden the little time they had anyway is now being spread out. The great thing about this particular thing being tied to charities and local community stuff is the Notre Dame players are already doing this. Blake Fisher, I mean, how many different times have we seen Blake Fisher? And at first I was like, is he just like every other day tweeting out something from one, but he's always in a different outfit. So unless he's changing clothes between each photo session, this is Blake doing this time and time again. Well, now there's even more. There's a reward for. So Blake's already doing it because he wants to impact the community. Now there's incentive for him to keep doing it.
Right.
But also now he can help raise money, not just see right now, Blake's just giving his time to these charities, which is important. And these, especially for the kids, the ones with kids, like having this big giant of a man who's a sweet kid who taking the time for them is going to impact them. But now the organization now is going to have more resources to then go help. And, I think it's great. I think it's a great thing. And their thought is that we plan to make this a big thing for Notre Dame. This is going to be a game changer. This isn't what he said. This is me taking what Brady said
right.
and to a different question. And I'll have to look at the specific answer and say, hey, look, this is meant to be a big time needle mover for Notre Dame. And so anyone that doesn't think that, and that was kind of the question we were addressing before he called, if you don't think this is going to be a needle mover, you have the wrong view of young student athletes. And if you think it's been this whole bull crap I've been pushing against. Everybody's like, oh, great players don't have the grades to get in Notre Dame. Lie. Great players don't want to go to class. Lie. There's all these things. But at the same time, just because I care about academics, just care about this, doesn't mean that I don't have a need in my family, right? And some kids like Nico, that's what we told you from the beginning. They're not going to get Nico, right? So all these fans think, oh, well, Nico's a guy Notre Dame may have got, but then NIL. I told y'all months ago that Nico wasn't going to be a factor for Notre Dame because he was looking for that. He wanted that. Other kids don't, right? So a kid like Dante Moore is not looking for money. But sometimes people can offer money to say, hey, this, and then it's like, man, it's nothing here. And this, they're offering this. I'm not looking for it, but dang, that's a big difference. Now it's like, hey, man, you come here. You're part of this. This is what these guys are going to be making. You trust me. You're going to be fine. Mendoza said in the article, like if you're a quarterback at Notre Dame, and playing it like a Heisman contender, trust me, because the other thing is, if you are a donor, you can say, hey, I would like to give this money for this specific player. I believe I read that correctly,
yes.
Vince. You read that in the
article. I read that exact same thing.
You know dang well there's a lot of boosters that want to be connected and have their names linked to the starting quarterback in Notre Dame.
Right.
Right. And so those are the things that they're going to do. They're going to be able to say to people, hey, look, we're not going to hand you a check. Okay. But if you come to Notre Dame, this is what Michael Mayer did last year. This is what Isaiah Foskey. This is what Jason Adamiola. This is what Tyler Buckner did last year. And this is what Blake Fisher did for doing what he was already doing in the community.
Right.
He went from making nothing to doing the same exact thing and making X amount of dollars. That is going to matter. And again, this is just, we believe, one part of this.
Right.
There are other things that we believe are in the works that are going to continue to be a part of this. So I just want people, and they're all going to kind of take different shapes and forms. And I think that's good. You don't want, you have one that kind of is all encompassing. It can kind of, well, it's not even a cookie cutter, but it's like, sometimes it's like the demand is too big for one thing. And so I think sometimes it's good to have this one is geared towards helping in this way. This one is geared towards helping in this way. This one is more towards the charitable thing. So that is a big part of it. So I think this is a really important thing, Vince. I do. And,
I'm excited about it.
We'll see how it plays out, right? We don't really know how it's going to play out, but I think if it plays out how they think it will, then I think it's going to be a needle mover. And the fact that there's some big name and big time backers to this is important as well.
Right.
I mean, when Tom Mendoza gets involved in something, there's going to be funding for it,
Absolutely.
And not just from Tom, because, everybody thinks, well, Tom's a billionaire or whatever. I don't know how much money he has, but
it's got to be a little bit. Yeah.
Multi-millionaire. It's not his duty to just pay for everything, right? It's also about, hey, I'm giving mine now, my buddy over here, my fellow alum over here, my so-and-so over here. How about you step up to the plate as well? It's not just about one guy, because that one guy's eventually going to run out of money. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And so that's a big thing for me. And as Garth Cassidy says, Brian and Vince, I think it will also help the Michigan community. And that's the thing I love about it.
Yep.
Right. That's the whole point is the Boys and Girls Club. So Blake Fisher's been doing stuff with the YMCA. I think that's who he does stuff with. Right. Well, they've been greatly benefiting from his time and the impact it's having on the young people, which at the end of the day, that's what matters most. But as you and I know, Vince, and from what we found out in different charitable things we've been involved in, any little bit is like when we talked to the Boys and Girls Club about giving them $5,000, it was like it was like an answer to prayer to them. And it's just $5,000. That wasn't even a lot of money. Now, all of a sudden, all these Notre Dame players who already given their time are now able to work with them, and there comes so it's almost like Blake's walking in with 2 bags of cash, right? One big bag for him, but then the other one that he's handing to the organization he's working with, that they were otherwise not getting.
Exactly.
This is huge.
So they're getting the player and they're getting money.
Yes.
I think that's going to be an undervalued part of this that people don't understand, and I want to make sure people understand. The money is going to 2 different places. It's going to the kid, but it's also going to the charity, which is huge. I think it's a great part of this.
So in Greekanese, this is great. I think I said that right. It's great. Greekanese 2006. Notre Dame has been doing great things in the community the whole time, so this makes sense to shine a light to what Notre Dame has already been doing. See, I actually think it's greater. It's beyond that, Greekanese, because it's not just about shining a light and giving exposure. It's literally handing them money. Like they're going to be, and that's the thing that they said is some of the money is going to go to the charity that these players want to work with. Right. So I think Logan Diggs has been working with the food one of the food outlets. What do you know which one he works with?
Is it the Food Bank of Northern Indiana?
I think that's it. It's one of those. But he's been working with them a lot and doing already trying to do things to raise money. Well, now there's this collective thing, or this fund that he can work with, and if he's make sure he's doing the right things in the classroom and all this, which I have not heard anything other than that's the stuff that Logan Diggs does. Now, all of a sudden, Logan is now not only is he helping to raise awareness of other people to give their money, but now he's basically coming with a check, essentially.
Right.
Or not him directly. You all understand that I'm making the point. Like what comes with him is this fund that will also say, hey, look, Logan wants to work with you guys. He's getting paid this, but your guys are getting paid this. Whereas before it was just Logan giving his time. So I think it's a great
Logan is doing the Dancing with Our Stars thing, and that benefits the Center for the Homeless. So I know he's doing that too. So this kid is active, man, in a great way.
Right.
Which is
and he's not alone. I mean,
he
chooses to use his platform to expose those things.
Right.
Which I'm all for. I mean, there's this notion, and I've had this debate, and I had this debate, Vince, when we did the fundraiser, which was, there's a passage in the Bible that says, "Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing," so to speak. And it was basically like, give out of, it's give out of the right for the right reasons, right? And then, but don't, like, I remember Ange and I, when we were in Denver, we were trying to find a church, and we went to this one church, and it was like, we went there once, and the pastor was like, lift up your offering, wave it in the air. And I'm like, what in the heck are these people doing? Then he says, he's like, you show me in the Bible where it says that you're supposed to pray in silence. And so I grabbed it and I started to walk up, and he's like, sit down. Like, you're like this. It's like, there's this absurd takes on these things. You know what I mean? And it's like, you don't want to be that person like, look at me, look what I'm giving.
Right.
But there is also a thing where we ultimately decided to do it was, like, God blessed us with a platform.
Right.
How are we going to use it?
Exactly.
Are we going to use it? And so that's what this is for Notre Dame on a much bigger scale than Irish Breakdown could ever do.
Right.
And so that's what I love about it is yes, we're publicly talking about this, right, to raise awareness, not a look at me, look at me. That's where's your heart at? Is your heart at, like, I want people to know how great and how awesome I am, or I'm going to use the blessings that I've got from God to have some fame, not me, because we're not famous, but like Logan Diggs is, and Tyler Buckner is, and Blake Fisher is, right?
Right.
But and then for what little niche we've carved out, how can we use that? And it's about trying to help people, not puffing yourself up, right? Which is why we didn't keep a dime of that. We gave it all away. It wasn't something for us.
It felt so good.
And there's something else I'm working on now too that I'm hoping to be able to do this spring. That's going to be on probably the charity that I've always wanted to work with, but I got to hear back from them about how it's going to work, because we're going to try to streamline it and make it a little bit more direct, so that way people can give directly to them. Because we looked into doing the 501c thing that they were talking about, and it's too expensive. And we would never raise enough money to cover it. I mean, so it's just like, so we're going to try to work people, say, hey, what's a better way that we can do this to where people can just give directly, so that way you can use it as a tax write-off and those type of things. So my preaching days are behind me.
That's great.
So, but yes, yeah, my ministry days are definitely in the past, so I appreciate that. So anyway, so that's kind of where I'm at, and I think we're going to see more of these things pop up. But again, with Notre Dame, it's going to take a while, right? And Brady made sure to be clear too. Like, look, the state Indiana law says Notre Dame cannot involve themselves in these things.
Right. They have to be.
So this is going to go completely through the organization. So all the coaching staff can do is kind of sit on the sidelines and cheer them on. They can't directly be involved with it. So you, which is kind of weird. So like anyway, it's a different conversation.
Yeah, it is, but they have to be separate. I mean, that was made very clear in the article, and I'm sure Brady reiterated that when he talked to you.
Yeah.
But it's a separate situation.
Yep. So that's that on the NIL. So I do think this is going to be a game changer for Notre Dame, Vince. And we, Charlie Weiss's last bell loop, as I was wrong. No hate toward this foundation. Just curious how it play out. This is how Notre Dame needs to fight fire with fire. Love IB family. We didn't take it as hate at all.
No,
I just think you're not correct. It doesn't mean that you're hateful or anything else. It's just, I just don't think you're correct. I think you have and I understand why you feel that way. A lot of people feel this way because honestly, that's how the media portrays young people, especially young black men. It's all about the money and it's the bling and all this other, and that's not how most people I know are.
Well, and
that's just how the media likes to portray people.
And most people think NIL is specifically just for recruiting, which it's not. That's not. I mean,
well, that's what it's turned into.
That's what it's turned into.
But the reality is that not every kid is that way.
Right.
I mean, some kids are going to look at this and be like, I got to work for it. Forget that. And they're going to go somewhere else. That's fine. But that kid wasn't coming to Notre Dame anyway.
Right.
That's what you got to understand. There's been a lot of kids that would have liked to have come to Notre Dame, but there was a need, like a legitimate need in their family that they had to meet. They can meet that now. And there's going to be parents who are going to want them to meet that now. And that's the whole thing is I just think there's this misguided perception of young people. I've heard people say, well, I would take the money. So everybody else. No, that's a you thing. And that's not wrong. But that's just you.
That's
Don't assume that everybody else is that way.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like there are plenty of people that, Vince, you know this. There's plenty of people that will. It's not easy, but I mean, Vince knows this. I won't get into it, but we were offered at Irish Breakdown was offered something substantial, and we said no because
we're playing the long game, and
and we have a vision for what this thing is going to be about, right? And so money isn't everyone's number one priority.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean it's not important, but it's not always people's number one priority. And I think that's what is often missed about these young people. Is like a kid like Dante Moore, if he was all about where can I make the most money, he never would have given Notre Dame the time of day. Right? That's just the reality. Now, Carnell Tate's a little bit of a different story, but Charles Jagoose is different. Keon Keeley's different. It doesn't mean that the money's not not important, but it's not the primary decision maker, right? I mean, if I was making $80,000 and I told my wife I was going to go take a job for $20,000, that would be a problem.
Yeah,
right.
That conversation wouldn't go well.
we have bills to meet, right? Obligations to meet. But if I could take a job for $50,000 that still allows us to pay our bills, but I was going to be happier, then yeah, we would do that, right? And we have done that.
Yeah.
So
I did that when I came on board with IB. To be honest,
I did that when I got back into coaching.
Exactly. Right.
I mean, I took a big pay cut to get back into coaching.
I mean, it is what it is.
So anyway, I think that's the issue with you, Charlie's and Weiss's last belt loop is it wasn't so much that you were hating or anything like that. It's just I just think there's this fundamental misunderstanding of young people, and that they're all just looking for the most money they can, and they don't care about this, they don't care about that. And I think Blake Fishers and Logan Diggs are perfect examples of that. Both of them could have left this offseason. I guarantee you there was conversations that people tried to have with people around Blake Fisher to say, look, come for here. We can do this, this, and this, and this. You don't think Blake Fisher's had people reach out to him about possible things like that? I bet you he has. I don't know for a fact, but I'll bet you he has.
Yeah.
But he's still at Notre Dame. Because why? Because Blake's different. Blake isn't like that. Blake's always understood that Notre Dame was bigger than just football. Always. That's why he's, projected to be a top 10 NFL draft pick. It's early yet, but he's got that kind of talent, and yet he spends his freaking weekends going to the YMCA to try to help young people. I mean, there's a lot of kids like that, and not all of them are at Notre Dame either. Some of them are at Alabama, some of them are at Clemson, some of them are at Ohio State, some of them are at Texas, some of them are at USC. I think Notre Dame tends to have more of them, but this allows Notre Dame to even more attract those type of young people.
Absolutely.
And so I think this is big. In my opinion.
Yep.
Doesn't mean they're going to get every kid they want. But
that's never going to happen anyway.
Right. It's never going to be true.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they can plan. I mean, I just one last thing is that they just Notre Dame can very clearly show people or show kids this is the plan.
Right.
We have a plan for you. It's not a blank check up front. That's not how we operate. Right. But if you come to Notre Dame, here are the options that you're going to have. Here are the opportunities you're going to have. And the better you are, the more opportunities you're going to have. And guess what? Really good kids bet on themselves. I mean, that's why a five-star
quarterback. The kind of kids you're going to win a championship with at Notre Dame are
exactly.
going to bet on themselves.
And five-star quarterback comes the year after a five-star quarterback because they want to be challenged. They want competition. You know what I mean? It's that kind of a thing. Guys are going to bet on themselves. And if they have any eye towards education, they're going to bet on themselves to come to Notre Dame. So
no question.
It's not just the people with their hand out with that, are the top guys that are going to win you a national championship. That is just a farce.
Right. And it's also incorrect to assume that every kid that's an impact player at Alabama has his hand out.
That's absolutely correct.
Do I think that Bryce Young is getting paid a lot of good money at Alabama? Yeah, we've heard that. Nick Saban's probably made over $1 million already.
Right.
But Bryce Young went to Alabama because he felt that was the best place to prepare him for his future. I've never heard anything about, Alabama bought Bryce Young. I haven't heard anything about that. It's like not every kid's that way. And that's the issue that I have with a lot of people is they assume every kid at Alabama is an idiot who doesn't go to class and only cares about money. That's false. Are there kids like that in Alabama? Sure. To be honest with you, there's a couple kids like that in Notre Dame. I mean, you and I have heard some stories, right?
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Who just came to Notre Dame for football.
Right.
And it's like, not all Notre Dame kids are choir boys. Let me tell you something.
No, that's a fact.
And I think that's the problem that I have is that assumption that, that kid went to Bama, so he only cares about that. And that kid went to Ohio State, he only cares about. No, that's not why every kid picks another school. Every kid that comes to Notre Dame isn't a saint who cares about being a 4.0 student. Right. So, but this is something that I think does attract a lot more of those players. in my opinion. So, Vince, we got to wrap up here. Let's talk a little bit about the spring game, and I don't know how much of that you kind of got into.
None, zero, because I was kind of waiting for you to come back on that one.
Yeah. So as we kind of talk about the blue gold game, the first thing that we both want to reiterate is it's a freaking spring game.
Exactly.
And I don't care. I don't care if Tyler Buckner goes 19 of 20 for 375 yards and 9 touchdowns. Okay. It's a spring game.
It'll be fun to watch.
Just like if he goes 1 of 15, it's a freaking spring game.
Right.
Right. The Justin Fields, before his first, his last season, Ohio State went something like 4 of 13 in the spring game. Remember when people were legitimately claiming that Deshaun Kaiser might get beat out by Montgomery Van Gorder because of how bad he was in the spring game? Y'all, it's a
I remember that
game.
That was the one that they had on the practice field because the stadium was under construction, right?
Correct. Yeah. Having said that, there are things that we're looking for in the spring game that I want to see as part of the evaluation process. And we were talking about this on the show last night, Vince. And the biggest thing for me, honestly, the biggest takeaway is the lines. Especially the offensive line. And that is probably where I'm going to spend most of my time. The first thing I want to see, Vince, I want to see a different attitude up front. I want to see coming off the line. I want to see striking. I want to see movement. I want to see resetting the line. I want to see the compete level raised. I'm not going to care as much about execution because that's just, you're 14 practices into Harry Hiestan's tenure. You're going to have the spring game, then you're going to have the summer, and then you're going to have at least 25 practices before Ohio State. You're not even a third of the way, you're actually probably a little over a third of the way through the process, but not much. So I don't care about, Blake Fisher didn't set well enough on this and got beat first. I don't care about that. Right. Those things will get worked out. It's April. But what should be evident now is the toughness there, is the compete level there, is the wanting to fight there. That's more than anything what I'm looking for in this game, Vince.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think it's going to be, are they firing off the line? Are they, aggressive when it comes to run blocking? I think those are all the things that we were missing, in the last few years. And now 2020 is a bit of an odd year and we've talked about it a million times as to why they were more aggressive in 2020.
Right.
But overall, in the tenure of Jeff Quinn, that was not the case in the run game. Right. And I could care less if they're hitting the right guy. I just want to see them fire off and hit somebody. You know what I mean? And be aggressive with it.
I mean, yes, I'd like for them to do both.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm just not going to get too worked up about a guy that, footwork wasn't correct or whatever else.
If we're seeing those fundamental things, that is a great change moving forward for what it's going to look like in the fall. And I fully anticipate that is what we are going to see on Saturday. Fully anticipate it. I will be upset if I don't see that because even after 14 practices, I expect
that's something that should have taken hold by now.
Yes, absolutely.
That's like, look, the depth chart at receiver, I don't care about that. I mean, I don't want to see him going out there dropping 50 balls.
Right.
I want to see some improvement there from a technical standpoint. I don't know how the scrimmage is going to go. I don't know what the format's going to be. Lou, Vince, you're going to be at the draft tomorrow.
I'll be at the draft. Okay. I said this a little bit earlier when you were off. I'm assuming since they're drafting it, it's going to be more like a real football game. Because when it's offense versus defense, you need to have some way for the defense to score. And so they have all those weird scoring ways, right? But if you're drafting it, it should be even.
It would most likely be 2 teams.
Exactly. And so they should be playing football, I would hope.
Right.
So, but I'm hoping they tell us that tomorrow.
Yeah. So we'll find out all that kind of stuff. But I think the thing for me is, yes, I want to see the receivers showing some improvement. That's gonna. I mean, there should be noticeable improvement from a technical standpoint. Again, the results, we'll see what the results are, but technically there should be improvement. That's the big thing for me offensively. And, look, the offense isn't going to show us a ton. I mean, they're not. They're going to show us stuff we've already seen on film. But it'll be nice to kind of see just how, if they move the receivers around at all. Do they all line up at the same positions? Are they going to, move them around?
Yeah.
How do they get the backs involved in the pass game? Last spring, we saw them getting Chris Tyree and some other guys more involved in the pass game. I think that's another part. And then, of course, the fun part of spring is getting to see guys we haven't seen much of. I'm looking forward to this isn't a knock at all on Logan Diggs and Chris Tyree, but I kind of feel like I already know what they can do. Like I'm already excited what they can do if they're healthy because we've seen it. I want to see Audric Estime and Jadarian Price, not because I like them more than the other two kids. It's just like I already know what those guys can do when they're healthy, right? I want to see those.
See
I want to see that.
Price do his thing.
I want to see Deion Colsey and Jane Thomas more than I care about Braden Lindsay or Lorenzo Styles. Again, not that I think they're better players. It's just I kind of feel like I already know what those guys can do. I don't know as much about those other guys. So I think offensively, that's the final piece. And look, I'm not going to lie. Do I hope that the quarterbacks play well? Yes.
Of course.
I do.
Yes.
I don't want them to play poorly. I just don't care a ton if they do. But I'll say this, part of it depends on why. If they don't play well, and I'm not predicting that they will. I mean, I've heard a lot of good things about how Tyler Buckner especially has played.
Yeah.
The big thing for me, however, is if they don't play well, why? Are they just off a little bit on throws, or are they getting rattled by pressure? Like that matters a lot more to me than the guy just was off today. Just that he's just off, forced a couple throw. Like if a guy forces a throw into triple coverage just because he's trying to do, fine, I don't care. You get in the film and say, oh yeah, can't make that throw, right? But if a guy's throwing into triple coverage because he's getting pressured and he just panics, that's a different thing to me, Vince. That matters more to me.
Absolutely.
Because that tells me, if you're getting rattled in a blue gold game, what's that going to say when you're playing in Columbus? Right? Like, so those are the things that I look for, is like, it's the mindset, the psyche, those type of things. And I don't think that's going to be an issue, because we saw this from Drew Pine last year. Drew got his butt kicked in, like, physically. I mean, he made some really tough in your face throws last year. So I mean, we've seen both of these kids play in big moments. I don't expect that to be an issue, but that's really the only thing that from a quarterback that would really concern me, is if a kid just looked rattled.
Yeah.
Right. And but even then, it's like Deshaun Kaiser looked rattled in the blue gold game when he played.
Yes,
bad.
he did. It was bad. He played very, very poorly, and it was not a good outing. And and when they put him in, in the Virginia game, it was like, ooh, all right,
yeah, for you.
Yeah,
somebody else is saying if something happened to Malik Zaire, they're going to be perfectly fine. I don't know who that is.
It wasn't me. I'll be the first one.
Guy.
It wasn't me.
I was just like, it's because it's a spring game. I just don't care about a spring game, right?
No,
it's a fun reward for a hard work through the spring. If they cared, if they thought this was a big deal, they wouldn't be drafting teams. They'd be scripting it to get it exactly how they want it to go.
Exactly.
So I just think that that's kind of.
Let me ask you this. I don't know the answer to this, so I'm going to ask you. In the release that we got about the draft tomorrow, it said, the captains are going to flip and blah, blah, blah. Do we know who the captains are for it, or has that not been announced yet?
I don't know who they are.
Okay. I was just curious if you knew.
Yeah. So you got to make sure you follow Vince on Twitter over here. So he'll be announcing some of that stuff. He'll be passing stuff along to me. I'll be putting it on the message board.
Okay.
So we'll definitely have some updates on it for sure. Anything else, Vince, that you're looking for from the spring game? Like, I don't care what Michael Mayer does. Like, I honestly wouldn't even play him.
I know what he can do. And I think the competition is for who's going to be the number 2 tight end. So that's what I want to see.
Yeah. See, can any of those guys, like, because I do think, like, the spring can be beneficial to you if you do play well. If it's a culmination of, hey, this guy's really had a good spring. He's outplayed so-and-so. And then we got to the blue gold game and this kid made 6 catches and this kid made 2 and dropped 2 balls.
Right. Exactly.
It could, so it's not like completely irrelevant.
Right.
It's to me, as a coach, I look at it as just 1 of 15 opportunities.
Right.
That's the thing for me.
Hey, they have 2 guys on the roster who are listed as a fullback. I want to see some fullback formations, baby. That's
a good point, Vince. You're kind of joking, but also
I'm kind of not, though. I mean, they specifically printed out new rosters the last time we were there because they switched some guys around and made them fullbacks. And I want to see why they did that. Like, show me some fullback stuff, which I'm totally cool with, by the way. I love having a fullback that's going to snot bubble a middle linebacker on an ISO play. So I am totally fine with having a fullback in the game. So if
that's kind of part of it, it's like, are there going to be some wrinkles that they show? Are there going to be some things that they show to say, hey, Ohio State, have fun trying to figure out how much we're going to use this?
Let's go.
There's some gamesmanship in that stuff kind of too. And we'll talk more about the defense on Thursday probably. Yeah. But that's kind of the fun of this whole thing, Vince, is some of that gamesmanship that, coaches think about that.
Sure.
And, they're like, hey, let's show them this.
I'm just saying. I love it.
Yeah.
I think it's great.
I think it's fun. I do some like wildcat, have some fun with it. Right.
Yeah.
That's the big thing is, the first quarter is kind of fun. The first 2 quarters kind of fun, and after that, it's just like, okay, this is just let's see some guys.
Yeah, right.
But at the end of the day, the biggest takeaway, Vince, is no injuries. That's the biggest thing. Just you want to make sure nobody comes out of this. But and there's of course like some of the young linemen, right? Like I want to see some of the younger guys.
Yeah.
I don't know if Pat Coogan's healthy or not yet, but Caleb Johnson. Looking forward to seeing Caleb Johnson in action. I'm looking forward to seeing, can we notice any technical improvement from like a Tosh Baker? How's Michael Carmody look at center? All those kind of things are all things that I'm looking forward to. And, I'm actually looking forward to seeing Steve Angeli play. Like, people think I don't like Steve Angeli. It has nothing to do with Steve. He just –
right.
It's my evaluation of it.
In comparison to the other guys that were out there. Yeah.
Well, and I'd like to see, there's other people that really like Steve Angeli. I hope they're right. So I'm really curious to see, like, how does he handle being in the stadium with the crowd and how does he look?
Can I say that I'm kind of excited to see the 5'7" kicker kick a little bit because that boy's got a thunder leg.
I don't really care.
I think he's good. I think he's gonna be fun to watch.
Yeah, I've heard I've heard that their PAT field goal needs a lot of work. Some people like it.
That's not good.
Like the practice you out were good, but it's been inconsistent.
That's not good. Okay.
Yeah, we'll see.
Enough.
So but the point is, it'll be good to see if they're in a game situation if he's able to knock those down.
Absolutely.
Right? That's the kind of thing for me. So that's going to do it for today's show, everybody. Hey, but listen, don't go. Remember, tonight, 7:00, we're going to go live. We're going to preview the pending decision by Blake Fisher, talk about the school.
Braylon James.
I caught it. As soon as I said it, I caught it.
He already committed.
Yeah, he's already there. Pretty sure he's going to end up at Notre Dame. Braylon James is one we're less certain of because he's not already at Notre Dame playing right tackle. But we're going to just kind of talk about what kind of player he is, preview his decision, the schools that are involved, and then we'll have his announcement. And then once his announcement's done, we'll talk about what that means for Notre Dame one way or the other. So definitely make sure that you do that. That's why you got to hit that notification bell, but that's also why you got to first like this show, right, to help us kind of get it out, share it, so that way we can grow and get in front of more and more people. Number one, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share the podcast, sign up for the message boards, lots of good stuff. We've got a lot of intel, a lot of different conversations raging on the board, so definitely be part of that. And as always, check out our main page, right? theirishbreakdown.com. So I got some really good stuff on there. We have a Braylon James commitment preview on there. Sam Pendleton announced today that he's going to make his commitment. I believe, what is it, Monday?
Yeah.
The finals are Notre Dame, Florida, Michigan, and NC State.
Yep.
So on the board, we kind of talk about how we feel about that one. And of course, we'll have a live show during his sort of his commitment window as well.
Yeah, so Monday.
For Vince, I'm Brian. Everybody, thanks for with us. I'm sorry about having to jump off in the middle of the day, but when Brady Quinn says he's got one window to talk to you, you got to make time to talk to him. So I appreciate everybody's understanding on that one. But we'll be back later today, and we'll do a Q&A tonight after the show's over. So I know we weren't able to kind of have the daily mailbag. We'll do that tonight after the Braylon James announcement, and we do the breakdown of that. So definitely make sure you join us for that. Awesome. Hey, Vince, great having you on the show again today.
Yes, sir.
Right. And we will talk to you all again very, very, very soon. Thank you all so much for joining the Irish Breakdown podcast.